9 languages. Really? Marcus Whitfield's laughter echoed through the marble lobby of Whitfield International Holdings, bouncing off the Italian marble columns like bullets off armor. The 60-year-old CEO adjusted his Armani suit, the one that cost more than most people's cars, his manicured fingers straightening a tie that represented 3 months of minimum wage. His eyes scanned the young black woman in front of him like she was something stuck to the bottom of his handmade Oxford shoes. "Sweetheart, the cleaning supplies are in the basement. 3rd door on the left. Ask for Miguel. He'll show you how we like the floors done." The morning sun streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows that stretched 40 feet high, illuminating the moment that would change not just 2 lives, but an entire corporate empire built on the backs of dismissed dreams and destroyed companies. Aisha Thompson stood perfectly still, her posture impeccable despite the faded maintenance uniform that hung loose on her athletic frame. 23 years old, brown skin that seemed to glow with an inner light even under the harsh fluorescent overheads. Eyes that held secrets Marcus Whitfield couldn't imagine, wouldn't believe, and would soon regret not seeing. The uniform had been carefully chosen, slightly too large to hide her figure, stained in just the right places to suggest hard labor. The name tag deliberately smudged, but still readable. Temporary staff, level 1 clearance. Everything about her appearance had been orchestrated to trigger Marcus Whitfield's assumptions, to make him see exactly what he expected to see, another invisible person beneath his notice. "I said 9 languages, Mr. Whitfield, not that I'm here to clean." Her voice carried a quiet authority that made several passing executives slow their hurried morning stride, their expensive shoes clicking to a halt on the marble that had been polished by people Marcus never bothered to learn the names of. The space around them began to shift, the energy changing like the air before a thunderstorm. Marcus's assistant, Bradley Chen, snickered from behind his latest model tablet, the one he'd expensed last week along with a dozen other unnecessary purchases that accounting would never question because Bradley knew where too many bodies were buried. "Security's on their way, sir." Another one trying to sneak into the shareholders' meeting. 3rd one this month. Should I call the police this time or just have them escorted out? Bradley's voice carried that particular tone of someone who'd learned to mirror his boss's cruelty to survive in this ecosystem of calculated brutality. The transformation hadn't always been this complete. 6 hours earlier at 3:47 a.m., Aisha had stood in front of her bathroom mirror in her cramped Queens apartment, the one she'd maintained for cover despite having access to much better through her federal position. She'd carefully placed the maintenance uniform over her designer dress, the Diane von Furstenberg she'd bought with her first Department of Justice paycheck. The dress that meant she'd made it, that she was more than what people saw on the surface. The plan had been 3 months in the making, but really it had been 3 years. 3 years since her father's company, Thompson Technologies, had been destroyed by Whitfield International through a hostile takeover that left 800 employees without jobs, dozens of families destroyed, and one man's American dream shattered on the altar of corporate greed. 3 years since Marcus Whitfield had laughed at her father's accent during the acquisition meeting, mocking his Nigerian heritage while stealing his revolutionary encryption software, the kind that governments paid millions for. 3 years since her father had come home, his shoulders bent not from age, but from the weight of watching everything he'd built over 20 years get absorbed into Whitfield's empire for pennies on the dollar. "You people always think you can just walk in here," Marcus continued, his voice dripping with the kind of condescension that only comes from never having been challenged, never having lost, never having someone look him in the eye and refuse to blink. The lobby's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What's next?" You're going to tell me you have an MBA from Harvard? That you're secretly a princess from Wakanda? That you deserve to be here? Each word was carefully chosen to cut, to diminish, to remind everyone watching that there was an order to things, and that order placed him at the top and people who looked like Aisha at the bottom. Aisha's fingers found the worn badge on her uniform, her thumb tracing the edges that she'd carefully frayed to look authentic. The same badge that had gotten her through security for the past week, while she documented every single violation, every embezzled dollar, every racist comment recorded on her hidden camera that was smaller than a button and more powerful than Marcus Whitfield could imagine. The camera that had captured him using the N-word in his private office. The camera that recorded him bragging about destroying that Nigerian's pathetic company. The camera that would soon make him famous for all the wrong reasons. Actually, it's from Yale, but the Harvard one is in international law. The Stanford certification is in forensic accounting. Should I continue? The words landed like precision strikes, each one targeted to crack his composure. A small crowd had begun to form, drawn by that particular energy that happens when confrontation meets privilege. Phones appeared in hands like weapons drawn for a duel. The red recording lights blinked like tiny witnesses, documenting what would become the most watched corporate takedown in internet history. Marcus's laughter turned sharp, brittle, the kind that comes when someone powerful realizes they might not be in control. Someone calls psychiatric. We have a delusional minimum wage worker who thinks she's educated. Bradley, get security here now. I want her arrested for trespassing, harassment, and whatever else you can think of. His voice had risen an octave, the performance for the crowd more important than the actual threat he perceived. After all, what could one young black woman do to Marcus Whitfield? Nous pouvons continuer cette conversation en français si vous préférez, Monsieur Whitfield. Aisha's perfect Parisian accent cut through his words like a blade through silk. Ou peut-être en italien, posso spiegarle esattamente quanto denaro ha rubato dalla società di mio padre, anche se sospetto che lei sappia già la cifra esatta. The CEO's face shifted, tectonic plates of his composure grinding against each other. Just slightly, a crack in the marble facade that he'd spent decades polishing. His eyes darted to the growing crowd, calculating damage control, unaware that damage control was already impossible. Bradley stepped forward, his hand reaching for Aisha's arm with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences. That's enough. You need to leave before La Tilmisni. The Arabic came out sharp and clear with the Cairo dialect she'd perfected during her year at the American University there. Then, smoothly transitioning to Mandarin, 我知道你们公司在北京的违法行为，我有所有的证据. Then Russian, у меня есть все документы, каждая незаконная сделка, каждая взятка. Then Portuguese, cada crime que vocês cometeram no Brasil. Then German, jeder Betrug, den sie begangen haben. The crowd grew larger, pressing closer. Someone whispered, is she really speaking all those languages? Another voice, Google Translate says she's talking about crimes and evidence. A third, this is going viral already. 2 million views in 3 minutes. Marcus's jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck standing out like cords. Anyone can memorize a few phrases. This proves nothing. Security. Where the hell is security? But even as he spoke, his voice had lost its commanding tone. It was the voice of someone watching their world tilt off its axis. Aisha wasn't finished. Her hand reached into her pocket with deliberate slowness, theatrical in its precision, pulling out a single USB drive. Black, unmarked, containing 3 months of evidence, 18 months of federal investigation, and 3 years of carefully documented crimes. The drive that had copies in 17 different federal offices, 3 international law enforcement agencies, and one very secure cloud server that Marcus's best IT people would never find. Yoruba was my first language, the one your company's HR director, Patricia Summers, said made my father unsuitable for corporate leadership, despite his MIT doctorate. German was my second, learned from my mother, the professor you refused to acknowledge when she tried to shake your hand at last year's gala, because you assumed she was waitstaff. Each word was measured, controlled, a symphony of revelation building to its crescendo. Spanish my third, learned in the Texas border town where I volunteered teaching coding to immigrant children, the same children your foundation claims to support, while your lobbying efforts try to restrict their parents' work visas. Portuguese my fourth, perfected during my internship at the São Paulo office. You're about to lose for violation of Brazilian anti-corruption laws. The security guards finally appeared at the elevator, 6 of them, but they hesitated. The crowd was too large now, too many phones recording, too many witnesses to what was about to unfold. One of them, an older black man named William, who'd been there 15 years, recognized something in Aisha's bearing. He'd seen federal agents before. He stepped back. The 9th language? Aisha's smile was subtle but devastating, the kind that photographers would later say looked like justice itself. Legal documentation, specifically the kind that proves embezzlement of $847 million, systematic discrimination affecting 1,847 employees over 12 years, and 17 violations of international trade law that carry a minimum sentence of 25 years each. Marcus's face had gone from red to white, to a concerning shade of gray. His hand reached for his phone, fingers fumbling with the device he usually wielded like a weapon. But Aisha was already ahead of him, had been ahead of him for months. Your lawyers at Brennan, Morris, and Associates are currently receiving copies of everything. So is the FBI, Special Agent Rodriguez says. Hello, by the way, the SEC Enforcement Division, the New York Times Investigative Desk, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, Le Monde. She glanced at her watch, a simple Timex that contrasted with the Rolexes surrounding her. They should be opening those encrypted emails right about now. The ping of Bradley's tablet was almost comedic in its timing. Then another, then dozens, hundreds, a symphony of electronic panic. His face drained of color as he read, his hands beginning to shake. Sir, the board is calling an emergency meeting. The FBI just arrived at our Beijing office. Trading has been suspended on our stock. The Attorney General is holding a press conference in 30 minutes. The headline on Reuters says, "Oh God, Whitfield International CEO facing federal racketeering charges." The marble lobby that had seemed so imposing moments ago now felt like a courtroom, and everyone present knew they were witnesses to history. Aisha pulled off the maintenance badge, letting it fall to the floor with a small clatter that would echo in Marcus Whitfield's nightmares for the next 25 years. Underneath the uniform, her dress was immaculate, designer, expensive, the kind Marcus Whitfield would approve of if he weren't currently watching his 40-year career, his legacy, his entire world crumble like ancient parchment exposed to air. My name is Aisha Adazi Thompson. My father is James Adeyemi Thompson, whose technology company you destroyed with fraudulent evaluations and racist assumptions. The janitor uniform was his idea, actually. He said you'd never see me coming if you thought I was beneath you. He was right. He usually is. She pulled out a second badge, this one catching the light like a sword being drawn. Deputy Director, Financial Crimes Division, Department of Justice, badge number 7819. I've been investigating you for 18 months, Mr. Whitfield. Every meeting you thought was private, I was listening. Every deal you thought was secret, I was documenting. Every racist joke you told in your office, I was recording. The gasp from the crowd was audible, visceral, the sound of a collective realization. Marcus's legs seemed to lose their strength. He gripped the reception desk for support, his knuckles white, his wedding ring, the one from his third wife, who was currently meeting with divorce lawyers, catching the light. You're a federal agent? This whole time? His voice was barely a whisper, but the lobby's acoustics carried it to everyone. For the past 2 years, recruited straight from Yale Law. Turns out speaking 9 languages and having a personal vendetta makes me uniquely qualified to investigate international financial crimes. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow everyone could still hear, would later swear they could feel. My father sends his regards. From his new office, the one where he's rebuilding his company with the $400 million whistleblower reward from exposing your crimes. The office that has a picture of you on the wall right next to his American citizenship certificate to remind him that in America, justice eventually comes for everyone. The FBI agents entered through the main doors, their badges gleaming in the morning light like shields of the righteous. Marcus's hands were shaking as they read him his rights, words he'd heard in movies but never imagined would apply to him. The handcuffs clicked with a satisfying finality, the same sound they'd make for Bradley, for CFO Margaret Stone hiding in her office, for the entire corrupt board of directors who thought they were untouchable. As they led him away, Marcus turned back one last time, his eyes meeting Aisha's. How long were you planning this? Aisha's response came in perfect Nigerian accented English, the same accent he had mocked in her father, the same accent that had built a technology empire before Marcus had destroyed it. Since the day you laughed at my father's voice while stealing his dreams. Since the day you told him to go back to where he came from. Since the day you proved that you see people like us as less than human. 3 years, Mr. Whitfield. 1,095 days of planning for this moment. The lobby erupted. Videos were already going viral. Hashtags were being born. Think pieces were being drafted. The maintenance uniform lay on the marble floor like a discarded costume, which is exactly what it had been. Within hours, the footage would be everywhere. The black girl who spoke 9 languages. The millionaire who laughed. The empire that fell. The justice that was served cold, calculated, and complete. 3 months later, Aisha stood in the same lobby, now bearing a different name, Thompson Technologies. Her father cut the ribbon as hundreds of his former employees, the ones Whitfield had discarded like broken equipment, cheered with tears in their eyes. The marble was the same, but somehow looked different when it reflected joy instead of arrogance. The windows still stretched from floor to ceiling, but now they let in light that felt like hope. The laughter that filled the space was different now. Joyful, respectful, earned through perseverance rather than inherited through privilege. Marcus Whitfield watched from his federal prison cell, the news playing on the small television in the corner that only got 3 channels. The reporter was explaining how a young woman's multilingual skills and determination had exposed one of the largest corporate fraud schemes in history, how speaking 9 languages had been the key to understanding documents from shell companies in Panama, coded conversations in Moscow, and bribery receipts from Beijing. How prejudice had made him blind to the threat standing right in front of him, wearing a janitor's uniform like armor. The segment ended with a question to viewers. What would you do if someone dismissed your abilities based on how you looked? The comments were already pouring in by the thousands. Stories of overlooked talent, hidden brilliance, the danger of judgment based on appearance, the sweet satisfaction of proving bigots wrong, parents teaching their children that anyone could be anything, that the person cleaning their office might speak more languages than their CEO. Aisha Thompson had become a symbol, but she was already moving on to the next case. Another corporation with hidden crimes, another injustice waiting to be exposed, another language to learn, Korean this time, for the Samsung investigation, because in a world where people still judged by skin color instead of capability, where accents mattered more than accomplishments, she had work to do. The maintenance uniform had been donated to the Smithsonian. They displayed it next to her federal badge, her Yale diploma, and a plaque listing all 9 languages. The exhibit was titled, "Never Underestimate the Aisha Thompson Story." The description read, Aisha Thompson proved that speaking someone's language isn't just about words. It's about understanding their crimes, their victims, and their downfall. This uniform represents the danger of assumptions and the power of hidden truth. But Aisha's story wasn't about revenge, though revenge had been sweet. It was about her father rebuilding with dignity, about employees rehired with back pay, about justice served in 9 languages and one unforgettable reveal, about a system that needed to be reminded that brilliance comes in all colors, speaks in all accents, and sometimes wears a janitor's uniform to work. The marble lobby still echoes with that moment. Tour guides tell the story to wide-eyed visitors, their voices hushed with reverence. They always end with the same question. What assumptions are you making about people right now? Comment below if you've ever been underestimated. Subscribe for more stories of justice served. Remember, these stories remind us that power isn't always what it seems, and neither are the people we dismiss. What would you have done in that lobby? How many languages does it take to expose the truth? The answer, as Aisha Thompson proved, is however many it takes to get justice.